Hello friends, welcome to the MARE podcast. Before we get started, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Don't forget that you can find more about the MARE project at www.marehamburg.com, and you can support the project and this podcast through Patreon. All the links are in the description. Enjoy!
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the MARE podcast. We are here in hopefully sunny middle of August, wherever you are. September is approaching. Today I have the honor of welcoming Savannah Bishop in the podcast. Hello Savannah, welcome to the podcast.
Hi George, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you. So are you more of a winter person or like a summer person?
Ooh, I like autumn. Autumn's nice. The summer is so hot and winter is so cold, and we're all suffering through that summer heat right now.
Right. So Savannah is connecting with us from Washington, D.C., which is sunny, I imagine?
Yes, very sunny, very swampy.
Okay, excellent. So enough with the chit-chat. Let's get straight to the point. Can you introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, I'm Savannah. Up until very recently, I was in Istanbul finishing my PhD at Koç University in the Maritime Archaeology Research Center, but within the larger department of archaeology and history of art. So lots of fun perspectives. So now I'm in Washington, D.C., visiting family, having the first break I've had since the PhD started, before I go off to Washington State, which is bizarrely a whole coast away, to start my first post-PhD early career scholar gig.
Excellent. All right. Let's. I mean, I have to ask, how was it defending your thesis?
Oh man, the defense, because like we do the qualifying exams, especially like in PhD programs, and everyone's like, that's the hardest part. And you're like, okay, so the defense is less hard, but that's not necessarily the case. It's difficult. Like I think I partially catastrophized, had a lot of doom and gloom ideas of, oh, what if my committee asks me the most terrible questions in the world? That does not happen. People are like really nice to you, just like hard-hitting questions, but nice. So I think that's like something I would have told myself or tell future early career scholars. Like, it's hard, but like people aren't going to be mean to you unless you're in a really unique circumstance. Like that does happen, but that did not happen to me. It's not happened to any of my friends. So you survive the defense, and then you take like a month to become a person again.
Oh wow, interesting to become a person again. So how long did it take you? Is it a 4-year, 3-year thing?
Koç is fascinating. They style themselves as American style, even though we're in the middle of Istanbul, or the outskirts of Istanbul. And so it's a 5-year program for PhD, at least currently, which works great because the Texas A&M model used to be like that although they used to do like 10 years, but they'd also do an entire shipwreck. So 5 years for PhD, which is 2 years of coursework, and then 3 years to do research and work on your actual dissertation.
Okay, interesting. So if I understood correctly from what you've been writing, publishing, presenting, you like 3D models.
Yes.
You like them a lot. You're like fascinated by them. So do you want to talk to us a bit about your research? Like, what do you do generally?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big proponent of digital and scientific archaeology as applied to maritime archaeology, maritime materials. So I do both the documentation elements. I really like photogrammetry. It's the fun, easy, free way to do 3D modeling, especially for archaeologists. It was really cool because I got to work with an engineering lab, and I was like, yeah, I know, I just do photogrammetry. And they're like, what's that? I was like, what do you mean what's that? That's the easy, cheap part. You get to make perfect copies of things that exist in the real world. And they're like, you can do that without a very expensive laser scanner? And I was like, yes, actually. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that. And so I got to apply it both for like my dissertation research and then also for a number of the projects I'm working on, just because, as we know, documentation is a huge part of archaeology nowadays, especially maritime archaeology and cultural heritage, where you don't know what's going to survive how long. So I'm a big fan of that, and I got to apply it for those things. I think my first fun thing with my first summer of PhD, I got to go work at the Bodrum Institute for Nautical Archaeology Research Center through Texas A&M, but through Koç. And so we were working on documenting through photogrammetry the ancient ship timbers of the M.A.R.E. So ancient Byzantine ship timbers, but extra fun 3D modeling because they have to stay wet, but not too wet. Wet to survive, not wet so that you could actually document them. So it's take a million photos, spritz them with water, dry them off, take more photos. So fun, but not exactly, not the easy part, but they're like, it's easy. So
wow, very interesting. So what made you get into that? Like, how did you discover photogrammetry out of all things?
So it's really fun. I think it's funny in retrospect because in my master's, we got a fancy new Artex spider to work with um, at our university. It was very exciting. A ton of universities had to chip in to actually be able to afford it. And that's one of the handheld laser scanners. It looks like an iron. You just hold it and you zone it around the object and you're like, oh, nice scan. But then as you get into PhD or you go elsewhere, you're like, oh, this place does not have one of those. And that is exorbitantly expensive. So what is our other option? And that's when I found photogrammetry. I had a great friend, Gunjay, who taught me the whole process for ancient ship timbers, which I've been adapted to. Small scale, large scale, you can do a lot with it. So I kind of came to it because I was like, oh, I know how to do that. I was like, oh, wait, I don't actually know that workflow. So I still need to learn the process again, even though you think you know it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay, interesting. And so you've been like working with photogrammetry and 3D models since your master's. Is that what you're saying? All the way through the PhD. Wow, that's incredible. So now on this next step on the university you're going now to teach, what are you teaching exactly?
So that's
if you can tell us, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the exciting part. I'm gonna get a lot of coursework in. I'm doing 7 courses in like 9 months, 3 quarter semesters. So I'm going to do some of the basics, so like some prehistory through the Middle Ages, some ancient Greek, ancient Rome. But I'm also getting to teach either or maybe both seafaring. And then I've developed a course called Digitizing the Past. I taught it at Coach. And so it's very much teaching these digital tools to undergraduate students and letting them sort of also come to you and be like, hey, I've heard this exists. And you either are like, yes, I use that, or I've not used that yet. Let's learn how to use it. So some more hands-on experiential approaches to that kind of stuff.
Oh, wow, that is fascinating. So how did you come to find out about maritime archaeology? How did you get into this world of maritime archaeology?
So I think like a lot of us, as we're starting out looking into archaeology, you see all the subfields. And you're like, okay, so you could go into like bioarchaeology, you could go into botanical archaeology, or there's maritime archaeology, which means that you have a larger range of things you can actually choose from and look at. And kind of swing and a miss because I went to my first excavation and every year they switched from maritime to terrestrial. I ended up at the terrestrial one. I went and I just did a scuba certification because my father's in the Navy. So I wanted to learn how to scuba dive and was like, oh, that's a useful skill for my resume. And then I was looking at like my PhD options and I was like, honestly, I don't have like a period of specialization. I do ceramics, but I also do other things. What's the best possible approach for me where I can still have some breadth and depth for my research? And then Coach University has their new maritime research program and center. And so I was like funding and maritime. And so I get a whole 2 years of coursework to really learn this while also sort of specializing in that way. So that's sort of how I came into it. I know some people are there from the onset, but that wasn't really my experience.
No. I mean, a lot of people just discovered it along the way, or like they just end up into it because they're like, I want to do something like that. I can like put it under maritime archaeology and like go there and do that. So the interesting thing, the very new aspect that you're bringing to this podcast is Coach University, because I think you're the first person who I've invited to this podcast from Coach University. So how did you find out about the university? Was it through the project you were just telling us, to the newly, when was that? When was the Maritime Center built?
They were founded, I think we just had our 5th anniversary because we had to reapply for funding, which is exciting. And so I'm their first PhD graduate, which is also exciting.
Wow.
But it's really funny. I actually found out about them because I don't know if you follow this, but a ton of the other archaeologists I know do. There's a single WordPress that posts all of the opportunities for archaeologists. It's a lovely guy who just updates it out of the kindness of his heart. He was sick recently. I hope he's doing okay. But I found it there and I reached out, and like you do, you've probably done the application cycle where you're looking at several different opportunities and just hoping anybody gets back to you. And they did. They're like, yeah, hi, we'd be interested in you. Yeah, you should apply, you should interview. So it was really because the internet exists now that you can look for these opportunities, and the lovely WordPress account.
all our love to this lovely WordPress account. So I understand that to do the thing that you do, and you've been doing a PhD for 5 years, you must have participated in like many projects. Do you have any favorites, anything particular you want to highlight that say, oh yes, this is absolutely amazing? And if there's like something that they do about public engagement or like publicizing their work, but like, go check this out, I did that.
Yes, absolutely. So I've been really, really lucky and fortunate because Turkey has a ton of ongoing excavation opportunities. Coach is fairly well connected. The research center has been trying their best. So we got to do research projects in Bodrum, in Orla, in Bandırma, in Istanbul itself. There's a ton going on in the department and closer. I think the one I'd highlight, just if you want a really excellent social media presence, I worked on the we think Hellenistic Alexander's Causeway, going between Orla and the Karantina Island. It's part of the larger Liman Tepe excavation project. They also have a dedicated Turkish maritime archaeology team that is working on an ancient Roman harbor, and they do a ton of social media posts. They were just had a 20-minute documentary on the Turkish news. So absolutely check their Instagram out. But I had a really excellent time there because you got to see all of the different ways that they're approaching this. They have conservators in their lab working on both terrestrial and maritime context. You get to see the much longer term Turkish excavators from the underwater harbor. And then we got to go and survey this causeway that is very much in the heart of downtown. People are there fishing and walking, and just life is all around you. And under the water, there's all this life of the fish nature. And you're like, oh, this year the water quality is bad because all the sea urchins are either there or not. And then also finding ancient remains of this structure that has been built upon over 1,000 years, because you have the modern causeway on top of the Ottoman causeway, which is next to the Hellenistic causeway with maybe some layers in between.
Wow. I mean, that's the most amazing thing for me, kind of seeing the continuation, the kind of the location was important. People are still living in there, doing something in it. Wow, that's wonderful. So where do you see this taking you, this career in mind? Because it's we say, I bring people here who doing PhDs or finishing PhDs and oh, I'm going to do this next and this next, but it takes bravery to get into this field and kind of really get into it and try and do it. So where do you think this road taking you?
So my hope is I'm going to really apply myself to one of those tangential paths. I would like to be professorial. I'd like to stay in academia, but I also know it is so competitive and so difficult. And I'm an American. All of our funding revenues have just totally changed or disappeared for either forever, at least another 4 years. So things change fast, and they've been changing. We know the field is changing. So my hope really is to just sort of be adaptable and flexible and be able to stay in the field and do the research I'm really interested in and doing and passionate about. And also, it's the kind of thing where the world, we are living in interesting times. The world is not stable. The careers we thought we might have at this stage, we do not, which is fine because that means we have more opportunities. They say our generation, everybody has at least 3 careers. So at least spend one of those careers doing something you're passionate about. I have friends who were computer scientists and they were supposed to have the most stable careers imaginable, and they are all not right now. That is totally off the table. So you might as well try your best at something you like doing rather than doing something just for the finances, which might crash out anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, sorry, a depressing answer.
No, I don't think it's a depressing answer. So did someone tell you that when you were applying, an undergrad degree, or did you have to take a leap of faith and see where it lands?
So partially, I do think American undergraduate academia and the whole system is a little bit predatory because they don't tell you about the realities of the field. They kind of expect you to figure it out or don't, and then you just gave them money and you leave. So it's very much the case where I had a great undergraduate experience. I really loved this. I was like, okay, I'll stand for a master's, and things have worked out. But you see progressively that oh, this is not an easy thing to do. And this is not something where they have put any support networks in place. And this is something that more and more people want to do. So more and more people are fighting for the same positions you are, even though you really should be trying to collaborate rather than fight. But it's the whole thing where limited resources. So
yeah,
that's kind of been my experience.
Oh, yeah. I mean, sounds about right. So, and then you decide to, again, take a big jump and move to the Mediterranean. Was it research oriented, were you moved by research? Because I can imagine you can do 3D models and digitizing in the US. But why did you come all the way to the Eastern Mediterranean?
So I was absolutely moved by research. I started out with a classics background. So everything everyone wants to do is either in giant museums that are their own issue or over here in the Mediterranean. So I took a huge leap of faith in the middle of the pandemic and moved to Istanbul to pursue this PhD because the material's over there. And I would like to say proof is in the pudding, proof positive, because I've had the opportunity to work with so much material just because it's everywhere. I'd be on a project and get a call from a friend who's on a different project who's we found this, or just visiting an ancient site and they're like, is this one of the M.A.R.E you were talking about? I'm like, yes. So very much so, I moved for the research and for the opportunities and for the material because it's over here. And also, if you want to be doing this kind of research in the day and age we're in, you should be collaborating with the people who actually live where the stuff is. So I could have stayed in the States and become a historical archaeologist. I did some of that like interning wise. But it's not super my area. It's very interesting. I'm always fascinated to hear about it. Some of the people you've interviewed for this podcast have had fascinating insights about that kind of research. But my heart very much lies in ancient ceramics rather than the historical ceramics, which are really excellent, really great typologies, but not really what I wanted to pursue.
Ceramics, interesting. Very. I don't know. I think that people who are interested in ceramics are a special type of people. I think sometimes you just need to like do a conference and put them all in the same room and let them talk about like amphora typology for 3 hours, and they'll all be happy and satisfied with their lives. I find this amazing. I can do it, but I find it absolutely fascinating. So anyway, apart from that, you've touched upon a bit about how it is like the situation now in the US is a bit difficult, right? I don't want to get like super political or anything, but I'm talking about academia wise. And because I'm sure that for a lot of people, US might have been on their radar. I mean, there's amazing programs in maritime archaeology in the US, in Texas, for example, and other places as well. So is there any positive light at the end of the tunnel that we can see if we're interested in moving to the US to do any kind of classics or maritime archaeology or anything like that?
I think one of the positives that's coming out of it is that it's very much sort of pulling people together. I think it's the awareness that it's no longer like, oh, the early career scholars have to figure their stuff out. Like, if we're up at the top, we're safe. Nobody's safe. So everybody's in it together, which is kind of exciting for the first time in a while. And the field was already having its own problems after this long and like with the new way academia is working anyway. So I think the fact that people are sort of much more aware of what the field is like right now, especially for early career scholars, and that people are willing to do things and that there are alternate funding sources that people are like publicizing more. The fact that we have social media to be like, hey, there's a grant you might be interested in. Like, I think those are the things that are really helpful. The fact that we are all in this together. And like, on the one hand, like, please take your safety seriously. If you do not feel like you should come to the States right now to pursue that kind of research, don't do what's safe for you. But I do remember being in Bodrum talking with students from Texas who are like, is it safe here in Turkey? Like, if you're a woman, if you're LGBTQ+. And I'm like, honestly, you're coming from Texas. It's probably equal, if not better here. Like, it all depends on your context and your own comfort level. But some things are worth pursuing no matter like what you're going to face to do it. So I think that's sort of the highlight, the happier silver lining of the current gray storm cloud of things happening, which admittedly also are happening globally. So,
yeah, oh, no, absolutely. No, that was a beautiful answer to that. So let's go to the other side. How was moving to Turkey? How is Turkey as a like place to go academically? Do you know? Because I don't know, for one thing, for example, it's like, oh, if I need to go to X place, I need to speak the language, or otherwise I cannot function. Is this the case for Turkey, or is it like different?
So Turkey is very much sort of at a flex point where it is a question, because to be able to do a long-term career in Turkey, working with the research, you absolutely need the language. To go as a visiting scholar or someone who's going through a different scheme, you don't necessarily have to. The more you learn, the more people will like you. It is definitely the kind of thing where like you put the effort in to show people that you care and you are trying. Like, I'm not great at modern languages, but anytime you can say a çok güzel, a merhaba, like, people appreciate it. So for long-term career, but that's also everywhere. If you're going to try and work in Greece now, you should actually be learning modern Greek and like applying yourself that way. So I think one of the bigger stumbling blocks for Turkey is the language. But all of the like people your age are going to speak at least a little English, and people are very friendly and helpful. And also, it is a global world now. Istanbul is cosmopolitan, like a lot of cities. So like I got to Turkey, and the first people I met, partially because it was the pandemic, weren't actually Turkish. They were Pakistani, and they helped me. They took me to the mall and made sure I had a card so I could use the metro. And then the Turkish friends I've met are really excellent and help you with the Turkish as they give you these really excellent metaphors and like phrases to use. So no, very much so. So tricky in that way, but also very rewarding and very much like, if it's something you're considering doing, moving across the world to pursue your research, it's the 2020s, do it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's amazing to hear, because one of the things I wanted to do with this podcast actually is kind of like I feel like in maritime archaeology, it's kind of like those circles of people, kind of like if you're in mainland Europe, you know about these 5 universities that offer maritime archaeology. If you're in like the eastern part of the Mediterranean, you know about these. If you're in the US, you know about these, and kind of like try as much as possible and kind of like bring people to like open their eyes to other places around the world that are doing equally amazing and interesting research. And as you said, funded or like applying for funding or anything similar, because sometimes you may find the things you like, not in the places you expect. But other than that, let's dive a bit deeper into research, into what you're doing, right? Digitizing, as you said, how did you say it? Digitizing antiquity?
Yeah.
What's the course name?
Yeah, digitizing the past, but digitizing the antiquity is probably a higher brow way to say that.
Digitizing the past. Why do we need to digitize the past?
So
someone who is not an archaeologist, why do we need to do that?
So I think one of the best examples I can pull is from my dissertation research. It is the collection of 60 looted amphora in the tiny M.A.R.E museum on the Amalfi Coast. It's a very small museum. Historically, it was free to enter. Now it costs like €5. Not that many people are ever going to go in their lives. And so the fact that these are incredible examples, it is the best collection of amphora on the entire coast of the Amalfi Coast. And also, so that is like the practical one. Having them digitized means that the wider world is like, these were connected. This is what this means. And there are these research avenues. They have the Van der Werf. It's like an example that's only been published once in one British publication. So looking for these connections in the ancient world and how they extend into our modern world, the more data we have accessible and available, the better. And then the very realistic one is the winter before I was actually able to go because I was delayed because of the pandemic. The roof collapsed on the collection, and 2 were shattered into smithereens. There's hope. Maybe someday they will be conserved, but all we have are badly taken photos, as opposed to every other amphora in the collection that we now have a full digital twin of as part of my research. So it's very much the example of exactly why we should be doing this. And like that's the museum example compared to what a lot of our colleagues are doing, which are out into the sea themselves in the ocean, with the climate crisis making it so this material culture is going to progressively be lost, be destroyed, whether that is by actual environmental causes, which have their own issues, or by a deep sea trawler, or like the Roman harbor I work in Orla, where they take water from the sea to go put out the fires on land, and they have to very clearly demarcate where the divers are, both for their safety and so that they don't just accidentally dig up part of the Roman harbor. So it's very much the reality that these things are disappearing. And like there are still problems with modern digitization techniques and where this data is stored. But compared to like an AI query, like being able to save this data for future generations, for the study and for the betterment of our civilizations and our understanding of the past, I think it's really important.
Yeah. So can you maybe emphasize a bit on the storage and the data storage part of it? So how let's say a 3D, this would be a stupid question, but like a 3D model, how big is it?
So that is the question. So I do 3D modeling through photogrammetry, through Agisoft Metashape, which is very industry standard, and which creates I think it's like a 1,000,000 polygon model. So it's like maybe like 10 bytes on your backup drive. But if you have 60 models, if you have 100 models and you have them high fidelity and they need to be somewhere where that storage is not going to decay, but then also they're too unwieldy if they're that high resolution to share easily. They don't go over the internet well. So then your other option is to decimate them. You make them slightly less detailed and then put them on a digital hosting site like Sketchfab. So Sketchfab, very easily accessible, very commodified capitalism, woo. But so you have these 2 different options, and also a myriad of different problems that go along with that is the issue of archives. It's digital archival, which nobody's got a long-term answer for yet, which is going to be the ongoing question, is how are we storing these in perpetuity? Like digital projects, we've had some really amazing ones. We have a ton that do not make it off the floor. And then you have a lot of digital projects that disappear after their funding is up. So it's this question of long-term storage, because people think, oh, it goes in the cloud, it goes on the internet is forever. Not this kind of digital storage.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's wow. Have a million questions on that, but it's like, okay, let's take it step by step. So first of all, thinking as an archaeologist, let's say, I see the value of like creating a 3D model of an amphora. Let's take amphoras, for example. But I know, like in reality, if I fly somewhere to go to a storage room to see an amphora, right, I want to be able to see its fabric, its wear, as I don't know, see any marks of writing in it, or any details that can it really be preserved through a digital model?
I think that's the question people had when they were first introducing photography, because photography was expensive. It was not super high quality. I think it's very much looking to the future of what you're going to be able to do with this data, and also the future of access. Because as we've seen, traveling, going places, like financially, like it's great if you're an early career scholar, you can get the funding to go somewhere and look in their depot. But if you're trying to look at 12 depots and you're a later career scholar without any funding, you're going to run into problems. So the more that is documented and readily available, the better, because that's what we've been doing with the Jamalti Bernie 1 project, my other case study for my dissertation. They're like over 200 amphora from the shipwreck that nobody, so that they have their own internal catalog that was made in like the 80s, but that does not have, I've been doing the 3D modeling. But so we know that they have graffiti on them. No one's ever done a comprehensive study of the graffiti of Byzantine amphora. So that's something people need to do. And that if you want to do comparisons, it would be better if there is a digital access to images of them or photogrammetry models of them. That's a question, versus having to physically go to all of these different collections. And so it's very much the idea where hopefully, because we're approaching these digitally now, the opportunity to put things back together digitally is going to make things easier rather than having to go physically yourself. But it is a question that we're still grappling with in the field, because so much of our research, even like old archives, you do have to physically go somewhere because things are not all digitized.
Yeah, and especially with like climate change, right? Nowadays, it's not the smartest idea in the world if we all need to travel around the world to see an amphora. Like things that we can do with literally a picture, right? But I see some, like, someone would say things like, yeah, but what we do with, ownership of things and permits and all that. Like if everything is one place, who do you ask a permit from if you want to use it for your research? And how does that work? Do you have any views, any like case studies, like something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a whole section of my digitizing the past course, because digital colonialism and digital ownership and property rights is a huge topic that is even like it's ever present in our current sphere of things with AI and who owns what, and is it legal that all these learning models now have this data? But also it's that question where if a museum has an object that should be repatriated, and they haven't, is it better if so there's the Nefertiti hack, which is essentially they have the Nefertiti bust in Germany in a museum, and Egypt has been calling for repatriation since it was taken. They almost got it one time, and then Hitler stepped in and said, actually, no, we keep this. So when you're on the side of the Nazis, that's not great. But so I think 15 years ago now, time continues to march onward. A hacktivist group went and digitized the Nefertiti bust and shared it globally. So anyone can access it now. You don't have to physically go to the museum in Germany, but it is the question of seeing the thing in person versus seeing the actual object. And also this new awful conversation about repatriation, and people are like, oh, what if we just give you copies back? What if we just give you the digital data? Like it's something we're seeing with the Parthenon marbles, and like the big IDA in the UK has done this thing where they're like, we made a perfect copy, so the UK can just give these back. And you're like, that solves nothing. That's a fun headline for you, but that's not actually an actionable item to do. So I've had a ton of discussion with like the students I was teaching, with other professionals in the field. It's like a big topic that is going to continue to become, I think, more relevant.
Wow. I mean, it will be a sad day, the day that, I don't know, the Acropolis Museum will be, I don't know, decorated with like 3D models of the Parthenon marbles. I don't know. That would be a sad day for archaeology, I think. But even though I must say that here in Oxford, in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, there is a room in the museum that is a room full of copies, sculpture copies, right? Which are used for like, teaching purposes, or just to like see, and they like, it's a clearly distinct separate room, that this is a room of copies. And it's actually, I don't know, I find it quite nice sometimes, because they're copies, but you can kind of like, you can see the evolution of sculpture throughout, like, okay, not like throughout the world, but like from Egypt to like the archaic Greece, and like classical to Hellenistic to Roman. And I find this quite interesting and quite like a nice thing to have at a museum, especially if it's a university museum, which like schools can go to, and universities as well can go and benefit from it. But okay, so let's go back maybe to the to the 3D model. So where do you see the future of 3D modeling going? Like, where do you see these going?
So I kind of love that you brought up, I assume they're probably plaster cast copies, which was very much the thing to do. Something I actually got to work on in my master's because we had a couple Neo-Assyrian reliefs that we had that basically, it was very popular. Like 100 years ago, it was the 3D printing of the age to have these plaster cast copies and disseminate them. So museums bought them first, and then in, for example, Massachusetts, the museum was like, we don't really need these anymore. They're kind of no longer stylish. So the universities bought them. And then they went out of style again, and the universities went and hid them in their basements. And then they got water damage and were there for another like 50 years. So now they themselves are basically artifacts themselves. And so we have them displayed again. The Harvard Semitic Museum has some, because all the documentation from the museum initially was burnt in a fire, are like, what if they're all ours? And everyone's like, no, each university has their collection physically on premises, so they're ours. But it's very much the question of where we're going with 3D printing. And you see a lot of educators and pedagogical approaches where you're looking to 3D print copies of things. Like if you can access all of the traditional Hellenistic, ancient Greek sculpture, if you can hold a statuette in your hands, even if it's not the real one, is that more useful to students than just seeing physical copies? And so that's something that I think the field is currently discussing very clearly. There's, I think, an initiative actually at the university I'm going to go work at where they've been doing the idea of 3D printing copies for educational use. And you see lots of museums doing this. And I think it's a really great first step. I think my hope is what we're doing with it next. For my dissertation, I read this really excellent article in this research project by, I'm so sorry, I think Oppengoffen, where they were 3D printing these seals. And so they not only had the copies in the museum to look at and touch and work with, but they had their visitors come and use them, and they could learn about handedness and how people would actually hold these, and like what kind of person was this built for? Was it too large for a child, too small for a woman? Like all of these different real anthropogenic factors. And so I think 3D printing objects for study is a little bit like plaster casts. Right now it's very in style. Is it going to go out of style? But my hope is the future of it, what we're going to use these for and what we can do, especially as 3D printing and these techniques and technologies continue to advance. One of the things I didn't get to do with my dissertation, but I want to do in future, is direct 3D print in ceramic. So we do like, I have a lot of experimental archaeology friends who look at the different ways you can look at ancient artifacts and ancient ceramics and look at how they were actually made. And we're learning so much from it. Like I took a ceramic photography course at MIT during my master's, and I worked with one of the girls in the class was Linda, who was part of the study on ancient Roman concrete. They have they figured it out, so they can actually make better concrete than we do as modern people. Whether that's actually going to be applied is a question, but the study of ancient technologies and ancient techniques and using modern technologies to do them, I think is a really exciting avenue that I am hoping is the future and not just like the dystopia we're all worried about.
Well, we're all with you, I think, there, hoping for a better, like moving towards that way. Either way, I think that was a wonderful talk. I think you gave me so many things to think about, and I just think about over and over in the next couple of days about the future of like 3D modeling. I see myself in like future podcasts asking people their opinion on 3D modeling and photogrammetry and how we use it. So first of all, I want to thank you for this, for being here, for spending your time with me and sharing your expertise and knowledge and enthusiasm with everyone. I'm sure that people listening right now have maybe questions. And if you have questions about Savannah, please don't hesitate to get in touch with MARE or with you directly. Either way works, about questions or collaborations or anything in between. Thank you again for being here, for being such a wonderful guest. Do you have any closing remarks for us, or the people listening?
I'm really, really pleased to have been on this podcast, to have gotten to be part of this excellent MARE group of graduate students. I think this is what the field needs to be doing, have all these new voices and everyone come together. So thank you so much for having me. It's so wonderful to be part of the voices of the rest of the podcast, like Maurice and Alex and everybody. It's like the lovely MARE Mondays that everyone should absolutely attend. So thank you so much, George.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for listening, and I'll see you all in 2 weeks' time. Bye.